How to prevent the spread of diseases into our environment with vaccines. Prior to diseases, someone would get sick, whether it was with measles, mumps, chickenpox. So they would get sick and we wouldn't have a way to counteract that sickness. So they would get someone else sick and then that person would get someone else sick. So instead of just one person getting sick and then it being taken care of, there was a multitude of people getting sick. And then since we didn't have vaccines or a way to eradicate the sickness, there was more cases of death. So more people would die. Currently, we have vaccines to prevent 12 childhood illnesses, and most of those vaccines are required before a child goes to school for kindergarten. Vaccines are the most successful way to protect your children and the children that come into contact with your children, like at school, on the playground, from illnesses. So all that you need to do is give your child the vaccine, and let's say it's for the chickenpox. So you give your child the chickenpox vaccine at the doctor, and then if someone comes to school with the chickenpox, since your child's had that vaccine, they're not going to get the chickenpox. So it kind of just gets rid of that whole situation. So when they go to kindergarten, they're required to be up to date on all of their vaccines, and there's a list of those. There are 2 exemptions to that rule, and it's religious exemption and personal exemption. So you can say, I don't want my child to have these immunizations because it's against our religion. And then there's a paper that you can fill out and you can put it on record at the school. A lot of the times your physician has to sign off on it, or if it's a personal exemption, it can be because your child currently got a vaccination before and got very ill from it, or your child's currently ill, like with cancer or like an autoimmune disease, and that would just make them more sick than not because their body can't handle it. If you don't choose to immunize your child or yourself, it does get rid of that protective layer for you. So getting the immunization, it is like a guarantee that that's like extra safety for you and the people around you. An example would be, so let's say my son goes to kindergarten and he doesn't have his shots because I filled out a religious exemption for him. I don't believe in immunizations. So he goes to school and everything's fine, and then he comes home and I decide to let him play around some other kids, and he gets exposed to measles. So my son doesn't show any signs and I let him go to school the next day, but he hangs out with a little girl that doesn't have immunizations because she has cancer. She's healthy enough to go to school, but she doesn't have her immunizations because she does have cancer, and it's not appropriate for her to have her immunizations. So now this little girl's around my little boy, and by the time that he comes home and I realize that he has the measles, he's also given her the measles. And then if there's other children in the class that are not vaccinated, they could also be giving that person measles. And I mean, it's just a cycle. So everyone in the class that's not vaccinated against measles has a chance now of getting measles just from my one child being around someone with measles. There has currently been a rise in people that choose not to vaccinate. It's not a huge rise, it's like 1%, but it's largely in the community, so it's like cluster groups. So let's say like this one school, there's like a big, huge group of people that believe the same way, so none of them vaccinate their children. And that's where it's becoming a problem because it's messing up the herd immunity. And herd immunity is like saying, okay, there's 10 kids in a class, 7 of them have their vaccinations, 3 of them don't, and one of those 3 comes to school and he's sick. He has the chickenpox. So the chickenpox is going to go to another one of those children that doesn't have the immunizations because he's not protected against it. So even though all of us are protected against it, it's not guaranteed that we're going to be able to keep the chickenpox away from those kids that don't have it. I mean, even though we have more, there's still that chance. In 1974 in Japan, the immunization rate was 80% for whooping cough. So they were giving 80% of children, like babies when they were born, the whooping cough vaccine. And there was only 393 cases that whole year in the whole nation of whooping cough. No deaths. So they decided that they were going to stop the vaccine because it wasn't needed. There was only 393 cases of the whooping cough, which was a bad idea. Because as soon as they stopped the vaccine, it went from an 80% vaccine rate to a 10% vaccine rate. That means only 10% of the babies that were born were getting the whooping cough vaccine. So 3 years after this shifted, you went from 393 cases of whooping cough to over 13,000 cases of whooping cough and 41 deaths. So the government decided that they were going to reinstate the whooping cough vaccine. They were going to give the whooping cough back to children, and then that lowered the whooping cough back down again. So I guess what we learned from that is, just because you don't see like a high rate of it, you're thinking like, oh, well, the whooping cough, it's gone away. Like, we don't have to give that vaccine anymore because so few people have had it. Well, in that case, if it's not all the way gone, it will come back. Like, smallpox is the only thing that we've totally eradicated. We don't need a smallpox vaccine anymore because it's totally gone. Like, there's no other traces of it. But even if we get rid of all of our whooping cough or our measles here, what's not to say that someone won't come in from a different country on an airplane with measles or whooping cough and get someone that doesn't have their immunization sick, which in turn gets someone else sick, and then the measles or the whooping cough is back. And now we don't do vaccines for it. So it's not a smart idea unless it's totally eradicated to just decide to not do that immunization just because you don't think there's enough cases of people that have it. Just because there's not people that have it doesn't mean you want it. A lot of people argue that it's their personal right to get or not to get vaccines. And I can understand that because, I mean, it is your body. You are the one getting the shot, but it affects more than just you. If I didn't have my vaccines and I go to the hospital and I get sick from someone and then they get sick from me and then someone else gets sick from me, that's affecting more than just me. So even though I think that that's like a personal choice, it does affect more than me. There was a study in 1972 where a man had a herd of chickens and they were all together. So he gave some of them a vaccine for an illness, and he didn't give some of them the vaccine. And then he introduced the illness to the chickens. So they're all together in the same pen, and half of them are vaccinated and half of them are not. So the half that are vaccinated didn't show signs of illness for up to 2 years, like nothing. They didn't have like hot spots, they didn't get sick, nothing. But the ones that didn't have didn't have the vaccine, they got sick from the illness. Like, the illness took over their body and made them sick. But the ones that had it didn't get sick from the sick chickens. So that study just showed, like, vaccines do work because you're right beside someone that's sick and you're not getting sick because you've been vaccinated for it. So the most important thing to remember is, if we just vaccinate for the things that will harm us, they won't anymore. There's always going to be someone that doesn't do it, but that's when, like, the herd immunity kicks in. And if there's 10 times as many people that have their immunizations and 4 people that don't, it's going to be a higher case that those people aren't going to be as sick because the other people have the immunizations. So even though it's not always required and you can always choose to not do it, it does help to keep you and the people around you healthy and safe, and not to introduce new things into the environment that are going away or make something come back that we really don't need.